A new station master had been transferred to a station on the West Coast Main Line, just outside of Northampton. He had come from a rural branch line that had been closed down due to the Beeching X. He found his new station very difficult to adjust to. Originally working on a quiet, peaceful, idyllic little village station, he found the new station very noisy. Expresses heading south to London and north to Scotland would race through at high speed and thunder past the station, whistling furiously. This he did not like. The ground seemed to tremble and everything in his office seemed to rattle as they passed by. Now, of course, railways are very noisy places with trains arriving and people coming and going, but to the station master it seemed like torture. One morning, Robin stopped at the station with his passenger train. The station master was watching him. "Good morning, sir. You must be the new station master," greeted Robin cheerfully. "Yes, my name is Mr. Flood." "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Flood, sir. How are you finding life on the main line?" "Dreadfully noisy," came the blunt reply. Robin tried to sympathise with Mr. Flood. "It can be, yes. It's definitely not as peaceful as the branch lines. I should know. I used to run on a few. But you'll get used to it." Just then there was a booming whistle in the distance, and Richard tore past. "It's absolutely ridiculous," exclaimed Mr. Flood. "There's no need to whistle like that." "But, sir, it's reckless and irresponsible. It damn well gets on my nerves, and I intend to make it stop." Robin tried to explain to the station master, but he wouldn't listen. "Make sure you keep the noise down when you leave." Mr. Flood stormed away to his office. He even grumbled at the sound of the guard's whistle. Robin puffed timidly away. That evening at the sheds, Robin told the other engines all about Mr. Flood. "Railways are noisy places. If he doesn't like it, he should get a job somewhere else," huffed Terry firmly. "That's certainly not the way to speak to a steam engine," grunted Roger. "We can't help making noise. It's impossible not to," agreed Richard. Jimmy tried to consider the case. "Maybe he's just a little nervous in his new surroundings." "I thought that too, but he didn't seem to care when I mentioned I fully understood," said Robin. "I thought he would have realised we have to whistle when travelling non-stop through a station." "You're right. It's the safest thing to do to warn people." "He needs a wake-up call. This ain't no branch line. This is the main line, and he needs to get used to it." The twins agreed, but Robin and Jimmy were a little subdued. The next day, Mr. Flood stood on the platform waiting for William's commuter train to arrive, when whistling fit to burst was Roger. He flew through the station heading north. Mr. Flood seethed with rage. For the rest of the day, the engines would whistle and make as much noise as possible. They were extremely loud. "This'll show that gobby station master a thing or two," sniggered Terry cheekily. But that evening the smiles were wiped off the bigger engines' faces. Mr. Flood made his way to the sheds and strolled angrily up to the engines. "It's you three that are the troublemakers," he shouted. "Excuse me," snorted Richard. "Don't play dumb with me. You've been purposefully making a lot of noise so to rattle my cage. I've had enough. There's no need to be so loud. Whistling like maniacs isn't necessary. Who do you think you are, barging in here giving us orders? You're a station master, not our shed master. You have no jurisdiction here. Engines should be seen and not heard, not just for whistling, but for answering back too." Terry and the twins rolled their eyes. "We have to do it. It's so people know we are coming," protested Roger. "Each time I catch you making a racket in my station, I shall send a letter to your shedmaster requesting you be moved to other duties away from my station. This will continue until you learn to be quiet." The station master turned and marched away. "Pfft, I'd like to see him try," muttered Richard. Indeed, the engines took no notice, and the engine screamed through Mr. Flood's station as usual. But soon the letters came pouring in, and under pressure the shedmaster had to act accordingly. "Due to complaints about severe noise level, I am having to give your passenger duties to Babs and Vic. Should this improve the situation, then I'm afraid they will retain your services," explained the shedmaster. Terry, Richard and Roger were very cross. Babs and Vic didn't like taking the steam engine's work away from them. They saw it as unfair. The two diesels were considerably quieter than the steam engines, but even they endured complaints from Mr. Flood about being too noisy. "You can't win," sighed Vic. Babs chuckled. "He's just an old fusspot. At least now this means Terry and the twins can have their passenger trains back." "He won't like it." "Well, he doesn't seem to like us, so it'll make no difference." Babs was right. Terry, Richard and Roger were reinstated with their passenger trains again, but were under the strictest instructions to stay as quiet as possible when travelling through Mr. Flood's station. "Oh, I'll be as quiet as Anne Frank. You'll never know I'm there." At the end of the station, workmen were busy attending to engineering works along the line. Engines must always whistle to notify the workmen that they are coming. Contrary to belief, engines can be remarkably quiet and catch workmen out unawares. The other engines, who had not been relegated by Mr. Flood, warned the workmen of their approach, to the fury of Mr. Flood. Terry was racing along with the Mancunian. He was still thinking about Mr. Flood. "Fine, we'll do it his way. I won't make a single sound," he said to himself. As Terry approached the station, he could see workmen on the line. "Look out!" he cried. Terry had managed to stop just inches from the unsuspecting workman. "What the bloomin' hell do you think you're playing at?" scoffed the foreman. Mr. Flood came charging out of his office. "What have I told you about making excessive noise?" he rapped. The foreman looked suspiciously at Mr. Flood. "Have you got something to do with this?" he asked with gritted teeth. Terry huffed and explained everything. The foreman glared at Mr. Flood crossly. "It's imperative that engines whistle to us. You nearly cost me some of my men, all because you're an old fuddy-duddy." Mr. Flood felt ashamed. Terry, surprisingly, felt sorry for Mr. Flood. "I'm sorry I was rude to you, Mr. Flood, but you must understand this is our livelihood and it comes with the job. If you can't settle into a new role, then maybe you're in the wrong line of work, sir," puffed Terry sensitively. Mr. Flood sighed. "I'm sorry too. You know, that branch line I came from was everything to me. It was just snatched from me. I was told to adapt, to modernise, or I'll be left behind. I suppose I'm too old and bitter to change. It's just not the same anymore." Mr. Flood walked sadly away. Terry said no more. A few weeks later, Mr. Flood decided to retire from the railway. The engines felt rather dismayed, but Mr. Flood didn't stray far. He comes to see the engines at the station. He chose to volunteer to help keep the station flower beds and small platform gardens in good order throughout the weekends, and overall he seemed happier. "I feel a changed man," he tells the engines. "I should have retired along with the closure of my branch line. I've realised I spent the best years of my life working in my little station. I'm not cut out for the hustle and bustle of the main line. That I know now, and I shouldn't have been so grumpy. Now you can make as much noise as you like." And that's just what the engines did. Now they whistle loudly, not just to alert people, but for Mr. Flood too. He stands and watches them as they pass by. He waves especially to Terry, as the Liverpudlian Standard 5 is his favourite. Terry feels immensely honoured.